Hello, viewers and listeners. Welcome to another mind blowing episode of Pathways to the Ivies. While we interview several founders and several students and several parents, today on our show we have the brilliant Sriram Subramanian, also known as Ram. Ram is a dear friend, but also the co founder of Clever Harvey, a platform that helps high school students explore careers before choosing path after grade 12. He is an alumnus of Brown University, Imperial College London, and UCL. Ram has also worked in US politics and PwC UK before returning to India in 2015 to transform education. As a part of his College Catapult Program, which we will discuss in this episode, he is a super mentor, guiding students through their study abroad journey, helping many achieve their Ivy League dreams. In a recent conversation with Ram, we figured out that about 30% of their students have made it to the top 20 colleges, and the rest of their batch has actually made it to top 30 to 40 colleges. In today's episode, Ram is actually going to focus and tell all you students out there how to identify your passion very early on so that you can make informed decisions about going to colleges abroad. Welcome, Ram. Welcome to the show. Super happy to have you here. For all of our viewers and listeners, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about more than all the things that I introduced you to and all the great laurels that you have?
Thank you. Thanks, Rima. That was a very kind introduction. Um, yeah, so I'm one of the founders at Clever Harvey, and the idea behind what we do essentially all stemmed from my personal experiences as a student, as a teenager, growing up here in Mumbai, trying to figure out my pathway forward, and I sort of remember back when I was 14 or 15, and I was a clueless teenager, just generally good at many subjects, but not entirely clear on which pathway to commit to. And what got me out of there was essentially just a lot of first-hand, behind the scenes experiences. Right? So I used to go with my dad to his office, and he used to work in a large warehouse for a logistics company. And I would just sit back and observe all of the different teams working on the back end. Uh, kind of insights that you couldn't ever get out of a school textbook, or just watching the sort of behavioral constraints when someone's trying to implement like an IT platform, or watching the kind of coordination that needs to take place when a truck has to depart at a certain you know point in time. I got a lot more out of those summers at that warehouse than I did, in any kind of formal psychometric testing or any of those formats. So that's something that stuck with me. And as I sort of went through all of these things that you mentioned, I was at Brown. I did my undergrad there in economics and South Asian studies. I worked in US politics for a couple of years. I did my master's in engineering in the UK. But throughout all of these, this experience of how I actually stumbled into what I like doing stuck with me. And at some point, when the right time came, it sort of took shape into this series of programs that we run at Clever. We call the Junior MBA, where we try to capture this exact same thing, this feeling of being behind the scenes and working on actual real world problems. And it's incredible how much students discover about themselves while doing that, and while they're, of course, learning about the real world.
That is fantastic, and I'm so glad that you used your experiences from your childhood to develop something for our teenagers, all of our pre-teenagers who are kind of in this journey trying to figure out, am I on the right path? What should I be doing? And that's actually a question for most parents I meet. And the most common answer and the most common question they ask me is, hey Rima, you know what, my kid also likes sciences, but then they're also inclined towards humanities, but they also like accounting. So what is a good way to figure this out? And since this is not my arena, I always tell them, I hear psychometric test is the best way to figure it out, and you just mentioned that it may or may not be the right way. So Ram, can you elaborate for all of our viewers and listeners, what is a psychometric test, and why, if it is or it is not the right way to figure out a passion for a child very early on?
Yeah. So when you're trying to figure out what you need to commit the next few years of your life to, um, broadly you're looking at three criteria, right? You're looking at whether the student has the kind of ability, are their abilities aligned with something, with the field that you're looking at. Do they have an interest in it, and is there opportunity in that field? I think a lot of people, you skip out any one of those and you're going to end up with a bad choice, right? You have ability and interest, but there's not much opportunity in that field, then that's tough on you. If you have ability and there's a lot of opportunity in that field, but there's not much interest, that's also difficult, right? I mean, I actually see a lot of students fall into that category. And what psychometrics are great, in the sense that they actually are a good way to figure out ability on various tracks. um, but here's the thing, that if you're generally smart as a student, right, you just have ability across a bunch of things. If you're good at one type of reasoning, generally you're good at multiple types of reasoning. It's not that you will immediately get categorized as the person who has a type of reasoning that's extremely suitable to finance, for example. uh, so general ability is something that psychometrics can evaluate, but a lot of the questions around interest are self-reported, of course. You kind of ask students, you do like this, do you like this? And students at that time don't really have the self-awareness to actually evaluate themselves and say, how exactly would I react in this particular situation, right? Most adults don't have that kind of self-awareness. So given that that's the input we're giving into the psychometric, the output is equally garbage. So what we have found, or what I personally believe, and I've seen this work, is ability is something that the psychometric can establish well. A simple way of looking at this is that your school subjects are actually a type of psychometric already. How well you're doing in different school subjects is like a very simple, basic psychometric that's already built into our system, and gives you some sense of ability. Beyond this, establishing whether the student is interested in a particular thing, in a particular field, requires you to actually expose the student to that field, to the types of problems that people in that field solve, which is what I see missing in the ecosystem, because it's difficult. How do you expose a student who thinks they're interested in finance to the kind of thought process that a financial manager actually goes through when they're trying to decide, how to invest a portfolio? So this is exactly what we're trying to recreate through the junior MBA program. So the program in finance basically allows them to wear the hat of an investment manager, identify risk appetites, research the market, identify which sectors of the economy they should be looking at. So once they've been through that process, and once they've actually created an investment portfolio for an investor, they've done the thought process, or they've gone through the thought process of what an actual person in finance would be doing. And that, combined with their aptitude for math and their aptitude generally for logical thinking, is a good way to identify ability and interest. And of course that field definitely already has career opportunities, abundant career opportunities, right? So that's kind of how you can zero in on that. But before they commit to that, ideally they should explore their interest across maybe 5 6 different domains. So that's the process. It's a slow process. There isn't a sort of, you can't snap your finger and say, okay, I came in without clarity, I have this one meeting, I did this one psychometric, and then I leave with clarity. It's going to take a few months of you actually experiencing these things. But that's actually what grade 8 9 10 is all about, right? Why don't you spend your time sort of studying, building your skills, but at the same time also figuring out where you should be applying your effort in the years going forward.
That's actually a great input, and I love the idea that you're practically experiencing everything before. It's like going to a sweet shop and trying sweets that appeal to you, not necessarily the whole sweet shop, before you say, "Hey, I want to buy a kg of this sweet, and this works for me," because you've had a taster. But my next question to you is, there's so many career choices that students today have, meaning humanities, commerce, sciences. That's basic, but there's so much more than that. So according to you, can you categorize for our students what are a couple of domains? You said 5 or 6, and of course you are going to start early on. What are those 5 or 6 domains that will give you clarity that, okay, let's say if I want to do psychology, or I am interested in psychology, um you know what should I be exposed to besides psychology that will give me a holistic paradigm of what I have on the platter for me before I commit.
Yeah. Okay. So rather than sort of going into careers one by one, I'll just zoom out for a second and have you think about generally what are the types of people you meet out there, right? There are uh, there are people working in jobs where the core function of all of those professions is to deal with technical systems. Right? So the body is a technical system. A lot of medicine falls under this category. Computers are a technical system, right? So there's dealing with technical systems is one broad domain under which a lot of different fields fall, and the kind of aptitude or the kind of skills, the kind of uh, rigor, the thought processes that you need for that are kind of distinct. And a lot of students sort of self-select into those. They sort of gravitate towards those fields, the ones that have a right answer, the ones where there is a clear structure in terms of progression of knowledge. Systems are one domain. The other domain is to actually deal with people. So there's a bunch of domains that deal with how people work, how systems work, how people work, right? Everything in psychology, marketing, economics, and to a large extent, like all of our design fields, fall under this category. How do people work? And if you develop a good intuition for how people work, you're able to understand the role that EQ plays in communication. You're able to understand the role that relationships play in sales. You're able to understand the role that emotions play in consumer behavior. If you understand the role that expectations play for a person who is using, let's say, a web page, so as a UX designer, then you sort of fall into this category of how people work. And there's a bunch of careers around that focus on how people work. The third domain is how money works, right? So how systems work, how people work, and how money works. How money works is also a very wide range of careers. There's a bunch of careers related to that. The most obvious ones you can think about are probably your as a CA or a financial advisor, but there's a lot more than just that. And oftentimes you'll find careers that sit at the intersection of the two, how money works and how people work, for example. So when someone comes and says they want to do something like investment banking, that broadly sits at the intersection of how people work and how money works, right? A lot of it is about identifying if a deal can be made in this particular structure. A lot of it is to do with where the risk lies. So you understand how money works, you understand how to structure risk, and there's a fair bit of work to be done in just getting people around to agree onto a broad, like, create a broad consensus. I think this is a more useful way for students to think about what direction they want to go in their careers, because you can't start optimizing for your careers too far in advance, right? A lot of these students are in grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, grade 11. The world is going to change drastically by the time they finish their college and get out onto the in the workforce. So my usual advice to students is, you might be fascinated right now but by what a person does in cybersecurity or in quantum computing, right? Which is great, but your undergrad degree should then just be in computer engineering or computer science, because it gives you that broad foundation. And then once you have that foundation, you look at what opportunities are out there when you graduate, and that might lead you towards a specialization that um, directly leads into a fulfilling role at that point.
I think those are some great pointers you made, and I love how you kind of zoomed out and put things into three categories, which is how system works, how money works, how people work. And I think that combined with possibly the results of your psychometric test will make a far stronger statement in terms of what you should be opting for. Now, my next question to you is: let's say, if somebody is coming in and they want to experience each of these domains, do you have a blueprint around this as to how somebody can get doing this very early on? One way is psychometric, which is like on the paper and you kind of figure it out and you have those results. But if somebody wants to categorize on what they would broadly fall in. Is there a framework that you recommend as a provider, as somebody who's dealt with so many students early on?
So we started working with students largely by giving them case studies, and we realized that this actually was good. It drew students in, it engaged them. It was an authentic test of what they enjoyed doing, and then we kind of scaled it up because at some level the case study required someone to basically um, it became very subjective. It came down to the skills of the counselor who was delivering that case study. So we formalized this into a series of programs that we call the junior MBA. So there we categorize them into the kind of fields that deal with people. So a lot of design fields, marketing fields, the fields that deal with money, so finance, data analytics, and so on, and then the fields that deal with tech, so tech, AI, bunch of those. So you'll find that broad spectrum over there. What we don't yet have a good enough coverage on, I believe, is a lot of the medical fields. I think those are still a little bit difficult. I've seen people even sort of, even if you go intern at a hospital, it's difficult for you to actually get hands-on experience doing anything because doctors don't allow you to get anywhere close to patients, and rightfully so. Right, as a high school student, you shouldn't be doing anything with patients, but that's the kind of field where it's very high stakes. You're dealing with live patients. It's difficult to get immediate hands-on experience. But even there, research is a good way for you to figure out whether you enjoy that complexity, whether you enjoy that kind of thinking or not. So beyond the junior MBA programs, we often encourage students to go out there and seek first-hand experiences, approaching people where they found shadowing opportunities. You can just ask people to say, "Hey, I'm really interested in your profession, in your field. I'm not going to impose any burden on you. I just want to sit around and observe how you talk to patients or observe how you interact with your customers." So a lot of people are okay to do that. They like being a mentor. So I think if students have the initiative to ask for those opportunities, they get them usually.
Absolutely. And that's actually, a great piece of advice. Now, when we were talking earlier, you mentioned something that, let's assume that a student is just watching this podcast and doesn't want to approach Clever Harvey or Ram or whoever, right? Or Rima. What is, you mentioned something which is known as the deal framework or something. I think I got that wrong or right, I'm not quite sure. But if you can, let's say a student is watching this, can you actively list the 3 or 4 or 5 steps or the blueprint that a student can follow while trying to assess this for themselves without you or me being in picture?
Yeah. So the deal framework that you mentioned, I'll walk you through that because that's a simple way by which colleges usually evaluate your fit for their college, and the way in which they do this is they look at whether you have broadly explored your interests, have you demonstrated your abilities, and have you actually showcased your passion for that field, right? So this is a framework that anybody can follow. This is nothing specific to Clever Harvey. This is literally how colleges evaluate students. um, if you The first step in the deal framework is direction, which is figuring out what you're interested in, what you would like to do. We normally help, when we normally work with students, we advise them to start reading widely around the field that they're interested in. If you're interested in finance, for example, you should be reading The Economist, right? It's a core reading habit you need to have. If you're interested in genetic engineering, there are blogs out there that specifically focus on that. We suggest you start reading those because you need to build up your knowledge base in that field. Direction can also be found through getting a lot of these first-hand experiences, like I mentioned. It can be found often through participating in multiple activities. So students already have several extracurriculars uh, that their schools offer, and I think just broadly participating in these, taking advantage of these opportunities, is step number one. Step number two is you're going beyond exploring your direction and you're demonstrating effort towards that, right? So let's say you found that you're interested in finance, you're interested in economics, interested in business. When you start taking part in entrepreneurship competitions, when you start taking part in the maybe the World Economics Cup, you start taking part in a bunch of these um, olympiads related to that, it demonstrates your effort towards that field. Your In many ways, this is the step that also acts as a filtration. So you might like something, you come to the effort part of it, you realize that you don't enjoy putting in the effort, then you discard that, right? Because you can't go much further than that at that point. So you do this direction effort for a couple of fields until you identify, okay, this is the field where I actually enjoy putting effort into. The next step after effort is achievement. So achievement is basically wherever merit is involved, you're demonstrating your abilities, you're competing against students in your field, in your domain, and you're at your level, and you're showing that you've got what it takes to succeed against competition, right? So this is, you're not just participating in competitions, you're winning them. You're securing internships that others aren't getting, you're getting leadership positions in school that others aren't getting. So achievement is something that we found truly only maybe 10 to 15% of applicants to college actually demonstrate in their profiles. And the final category is called launch. So direction, effort, achievement, launch is something that I think all students should strive for. It is when you have demonstrated that you have gone so deep into this area that you really care about, that you've made an impact in that field. So what this looks like could be very different. What this looks like could be someone who is interested in business, actually starting a business. What this looks like is someone interested in tech, actually building up a GitHub repository and building sort of applications that are being used by hundreds of users. What this looks like is maybe a designer actually taking on design projects on a freelance basis. Like what this looks like could be an activist actually hosting a large scale event that's drawing in, hundreds or thousands of participants to sensitize them about some topic. So this progression from direction to effort to achievement to launch is something any student can do, and when they do it well is when they actually end up becoming very strong candidates for some of the top colleges overseas, because they value this kind of holistic development.
That's actually a great framework. And I think, if somebody just follows your advice to the T, I'm sure they'll be able to achieve what they want. I have two follow-up questions for this. The first one is, the help, I mean, when the launch part of it. Oftentimes I have students who come to me and they're like, you know what, I have done a lot of things. Like, I've done the achievements and I've done the awards, and I've had a very deep interest in it, but I'm not able to explore or kind of dig out the right opportunities for me to showcase myself as, somebody who really cares. As you and I both know, and I think if anybody has done a little bit of college research also, they'll know that most colleges care about the depth of any activity. I always tell my students it's a T-shaped profile, right? This is what you do, but this is the part that they care about the most,
Exactly.
meaning one or two activities that has been consistently demonstrated through your high school. And the best way to do it is, the L part of your deal framework. So, if somebody wanted to do this, launch their self out there and show impact, whether it is even at a society level, right? Forget global, forget national, those are like really high end
Yeah.
terms, just local level. How can they go about scouting activities? Because, you know one is not having the opportunities, and second, let's say even if you have the opportunities, balancing your academic work, because at the end of the day nothing can take over those academics. If you can just
Yeah.
tell us students out there, I'm sure they will be, they would want to kind of, um, you know take it and launch there, just that they don't have the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So, see, this comes down to how much you care about showcasing yourself to college versus how much you care about actually making an impact. And the funny thing is, the students who actually care about actually making an impact end up also being much better candidates for college, because colleges are also looking for authenticity. Right? So, when you're picking this launch factor, you should pretty much forget about this whole college application journey and just focus on what is the kind of impact you'd like to make. Um, and this has to come from a very heartfelt desire to actually make a positive change. And this can happen when you find a cause that truly resonates with you. Like, have you seen things around your house that make you question whether women are really valued in Indian society? If it's a problem that really affects you, you'll start going deep into it. If that's a concern that you're trying to address, you'll probably end up founding some women's rights organizations. You'll probably end up volunteering with some. You'll probably end up um, working on research topics that align to that. So I've seen students who are preparing for, say, applied mathematics degrees. I've seen students who are preparing for data science programs, and they combine that in a very interesting way with women's rights issues by working on data sets where they look at what are the correlations between various um, demographic factors in villages, and to what extent do they impact on, say, the difference between male and female literacy rates, right? So they're able to create a predictive model that says, okay, villages that have this level of irrigation also tend to have much lower differences between literacy rates. Connection that you wouldn't have thought of, but they only got into it by applying the data science skills, working on the data set, specifically exploring what is driving this relative gap between male and female literacy. Now you can't concoct a project like that for a student. It has to be something that they identify by actually grappling with data. They'll only do it if they're truly passionate about the topic. I'll give you an example of a couple of students, and you'll see how this has naturally come out of their own ecosystem. We had a student in Bangalore who was very interested in issues related to wildlife conservation. So computer science student, very driven by wanting to make an impact related to wildlife conservation. And what he did was, during his trips with his dad and his DSLR camera to all these national parks, he started talking with forest rangers to identify what are the issues that actually plague this national park. What are challenges you'll face. One of the things they highlighted was this conflict between humans and animals at the border areas of the park. And so he got to work. He basically took a motion detector camera. He put cameras around the fence, and every time something triggered the camera, it would sort of capture an image of it, and it started sort of sending out alerts, right? And then he realized that actually the most of the alerts were to do with like harmless animals like cows or bulls setting it off, whereas what they actually wanted alerts for was for dangerous animals. So he went to the area again. He realized that actually the bandwidth is very low. You can't do a whole lot of data transfer out of there. So he installed mini computers on those cameras, like Arduino kits, with a machine learning algorithm that on the spot classified whether that image belonged to a dangerous animal or not. So only if it then passed that bar of saying, okay, this belongs to an elephant or a leopard or something that was actually dangerous to villagers, it would trigger an SMS alert to the community. So this is the kind of project that you can only get. You can even only discover this project if you really care about solving that particular problem. You need to go deep enough into the problem statement.
I think I love what you kind of put in, and this is something that I've even spoken about in some of our previous episodes. That when you're doing a passion project, whatever kind it is, right, it cannot be only for the college. I think college admissions officers smell through it that this is done from the perspective of, okay, putting an activity list on there together. And
Yeah.
then, when you see somebody coming up with something like this, it's 100% very, very innovative idea in terms of you know how students put this together, and the rationale behind it, and trying to really solve a problem that they care about rather than an activity list. And I think developing that with the deal framework is great.
I'll give you one more example. Actually, this is a student who came to us last year. He's from a Jewish background. Before I met him, I wasn't even aware that Mumbai had this thriving Jewish community. But turns out that there's a Jewish community that has been around for the last like 600-700 years, and they've completely integrated with the local Maharashtrian culture, right? And so he said last year there was some 600 odd people from that community. Then 200 emigrated to Israel. This year there are 400, and again 200 are going to emigrate to Israel. So he said in a couple of years this community is going to be extinct. Right? So he set out on a project to actually document the very unique features of their culture. So the kind of hybrid cuisine that they've evolved between the Jewish heritage and the Maharashtrian local Malwani cuisine. The very sort of syncretic dialect of Marathi that they speak, which is very Hebrew infused Marathi. So very unique features of that community, and he spent almost 4 months meeting with all the community elders, coordinating with various organizations that are working in that space, and he has put together a virtual museum. You can check this out at jewishheritage.in, and you can actually go through, interact with the artifacts, interact with the people, and you'll get a sense of this is the essence of the community that he has tried to capture in this before it goes extinct. He then ended up applying for a grant using this idea, and he won a 3 lakh grant to scale this up to other communities. And he's now working with several communities. I think Kashmiri Pandits have approached him to say, "Can you do this for our community as well?" So there is there's like an organic sort of takeoff that happens. He's now really deep into this cultural preservation context, and it came out of his own worry about his own community going extinct.
This is brilliant. I mean, when you look at and you hear cases like this, you're like, oh my God, people really care. I think in a world where, people become so monetary and so, I think, transactional, that's the word I'm looking for. We're looking at these teenagers who really care and are trying to make a difference. And it's brilliant that, mentors like you, organizations like Clever Harvey are supporting this, in whatever way, whether it's even just giving the direction or laying that pathway that, okay, you can do this or this should be your next step. I think that goes a long way. My next question to you is, Ram, in terms of the students who made it to grade schools this year, right, in terms of your students, if you can tell us about one or two students from this particular batch, which is fall of 2025, how did you help them curate a profile, or what their profile just generally looked like, and what their schools, what are the schools that they were accepted in. Our viewers and listeners will get a better idea of where we're standing, and then we can then probably go about delve deeper into the college catapult program, and how this program can help students get into whatever their dream schools are.
Yeah, for sure. So this year we worked with about 45 students. This was our first formal batch of students that we've been mentoring. Before this, there've been a lot of students who we've informally mentored through the process. But in Catapult, this is the first cohort of applicants. Um, Out of the 45 applicants, 66% of them, so two in three, made it into one of the top 20 ranked schools, and one in three made it into one of the top 10 ranked schools. So that, I think, from a as a cohort, it has been a very successful one. We've had students who have gotten into the likes of Johns Hopkins and Vanderbilt, Cornell, Dartmouth, of course, the NYU, University of Southern California. So these are excellent schools and very highly ranked. What I find interesting, though, are the way students eventually decide where they want to go, and this actually has very little to do with the ranking of the programs. So I'll give you an example of a student of ours, very bright guy from Hyderabad, actually Telangana state topper. Um, One of the things that stood out to me when I first met the student was he asked me, "Have you watched Big Bang Theory?" I said yes. He said, "I want to be like Sheldon Cooper, not Leonard. I want to be like Sheldon because I want to be a theoretical physicist. Can you help me there?" So that kind of clarity with which he spoke stood out to me. And when I got to know him deeper, I realized that even a lot of his sort of arguments as friends have with friends tended to do with concepts of theoretical physics. And they would argue about whether string theory was a better explanation or was there something else. And very, you could tell from those conversations that this is a clear passion. So one of his projects was to actually write a book, which is kind of like a string theory for dummies, like laying out the basic concepts of theoretical physics in a way that any of us, can sort of understand the contradictions in there and what makes it so fascinating. So he wrote this book. He published it. It's some 120 odd pages. It's available on Amazon, and um, he sold 100 plus copies. He sent a couple of them to Indian Institute of Science professors for review. They love the book. They've written a nice review on it, and it formed a big part of his applications to college. Now he made it into some of the top schools. He made it into the Granger School of Engineering at UIUC. He made it into a bunch of the top programs. But he ended up picking a lesser known university called Michigan State University. And he sort of had come to this decision by himself, after doing his research. And then when I met with him, um, I was just curious about why he'd picked that. And look at the maturity with which he's answered, right? He said one is it costs a little bit less. So he's already taking into account factors that are actually very important for his parents, but they aren't spelling it out. He said the second one is that it actually has a nuclear reactor, a particle accelerator on campus, like the
Wow.
kind of facility that you wouldn't find at any campus, right? There is a particle accelerator on campus. There are professors working on that particular technology on campus, which is exactly what he wants to work with. And the third is for his specific field for nuclear physics that he's interested in, it's ranked number 2 in the country. And he said, for all of these reasons, I think this is the right choice for me. I don't know if you agree. And I thought about that and I said, you know what, I absolutely agree. I think that's a fantastic way of looking at it. He's not blinded by the branding. He's not blinded by the ranks. He actually doesn't care at all about what people say of his choices. He's picked what's exactly right for him. So I absolutely seconded that choice. I think that's the right way to look at how to pick. He's has he gotten into some very highly ranked universities? Yes. But he's realized that the best fit for him may not necessarily correspond to what's known in India. So I
Can
think
I
that's a
virtually clap for this kid?
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Whoever you are, when you see this, I'm clapping for you only because I love how, you are not blinded by the brand. I mean, in India, it's so common to follow the herd and what your
Yeah,
peers are saying. And while I'm not saying that any of the universities that are branded as good are not good, but what I love about this particular kid is he chose what works for him. He's not blinded by what the world's saying him, and that shows. I think to me, he's already a winner. Like he's going to
yeah,
go a long way in
yeah,
his life because
yeah,
he knows what he wants, and the kind of clarity that he's projected at what 18, 17.
yeah,
Brilliant. I mean, again, if you're seeing this
absolutely.
episode, hopefully you are. This one's for you. I think everybody who's going to watch is going to clap. Sorry, Ram, I cut you out, but I just couldn't hold off the excitement. You can go on and continue with other students and the rest of your answer.
No, I think this pretty much summarizes how I look at this process as well. See, for me, the reason I like working with students who are applying to the US is because it the process of preparing for the application itself is supposed to make you a better human being. It's supposed to it makes you think about what you really want to do. It makes you try out several things. It makes you sort of figure out where your strengths lie, and it sort of encourages you to go very deep into that and meaningfully try to make an impact, and then reflect on all of it, see how it has changed you, and then write that in your essays, right? So the process itself is supposed to make you into a better human being. So regardless of what your college outcomes are, it's supposed to improve you as a human being. And that's actually what I like about this process. And that's we when all of our students go through this, I can see how it has changed them as people, as the process goes on. I absolutely love seeing that transformation come about in teenagers, where they suddenly become very reflective and very proud of things that they've done, which they haven't even previously thought of, as really good things that they've done, or they've overcome insecurities. They've figured out how to be very confident in the people, in the kind of person they are, very accepting of their own strengths, their own flaws. And I think it's a great process. It's why I encourage students to go through that application. And the good thing is, it's the kind of process that can't easily be hacked, because those admission officers can smell a mile away when you're being synthetic, and when you're trying to fabricate a story. They love authentic stories. They can see the messiness behind authentic stories. So if the minute they see a pathway that seems a little bit too good to be true, you know that uh, that's not as authentic as what they're looking for, right? So the perfect advice in this case is, you just find what you like to do, you do it because you like doing it, and you be yourself, and you own all of it, and you communicate your thought process, talk about the wrong turns that you took and why those were the wrong turns, why you turned back at that point. Just talk about your journey literally in very simple terms, and you will get these kinds of outcomes. You will get into the top 20 universities, you will get into the top 10 universities, except that that comes as a byproduct of just doing the process right.
And also not keeping that as the final aim. I mean, of course you want to be a part of the of the greatest university, but don't do it the other way around, meaning, oh, I want to get to this university, that's why I'm going to do A B C D E, is not the way to go about doing it. Instead, you say, I like this, I'm passionate about this, I'm going to do A B C D E, and I'm going, and that's going to show either ways to the admissions officer. And then whatever I get, top 5, top 10, top 20, is a byproduct of the process and not the other way around, which is fantastic. One more question before we dive into College Catapult. How can a student go about doing a research on the university, like this particular student that you said that, I want to go to Michigan State because it has a nuclear reactor on the campus, and US specifically has 4,000 universities. UK has another couple. Europe has so many of them. So, if a student was really passionate and he had to or she had to do research on a certain school, since with the the immense amount of information out there, how do you recommend a student go about researching, one, universities that specialize in what they like, and two, what really is in it for them for that particular university, like really having those insights, like having, this is something that's very detailed. So how can a student go about doing that?
Yeah. So I think one way is you just read up a lot on these universities, and a good place to start. I usually recommend this to students is called the FISC guide. It's you can find this online. It's the FISKE. It's a good summary of a lot of the universities, and it gives you an overview. It's a great starting point. It gives you a sense of what it's like to actually be on the campus and experiencing student life over there. I would say that's a good place to start. You can obviously make notes from there and then go a little bit deeper. Um, I often encourage students to look at the kinds of things that are very unique to that university. And this is part of the research process that we do anyway when we're making the applications, because when you answering the question of why this particular university, you shouldn't be saying things that you could say of any university. You delete this university's name, you put a new university name in, and it's also true, then it's not specific enough to that university. So we challenge them to say, can you find something about the university that is only true of that particular institution, that you can't just find anywhere. So like that particle accelerator on campus would have clearly been one of those things that is only true of this university, right? The other thing that I think a lot of students can do is just look at uh, some of the top research in that field. You look at if you look at what's sort of the top 5 top 10 papers published in that field in the last maybe 5 years, and see where those professors teach. And oftentimes it's very surprising, they're not necessarily the Stanfords or the Harvards. They For example, the person who um, invented this technique called CRISPR. CRISPR-Cas9 is a technique for gene editing. You can literally go into the genome and switch off genes that are going to be, causing diabetes in the future. So it's going to change the nature of medicine itself. Rather than curative, it's going to become preventative. Right? So I think it's immense in terms of the potential it holds. This research was the professor Jennifer Doudna, who eventually ended up publishing the seminal paper on this. Researched and taught at Colorado University Boulder, which doesn't even occur on the list of when people shortlist their universities. So I think that's a good way to expand the range of universities that you're looking at, because if this kind of path breaking work is being done at CU Boulder, then if you're interested in the field of genetic engineering, why is this not on your list? Right? So that working backwards from where cutting edge research happens is one. There are also universities that just tend to be very good at giving undergraduates the opportunity to work with researchers. So they have these undergraduate research programs where they take the extra effort to pair up undergrads with researchers, which is otherwise a difficult experience to get. A lot of the public universities do this. So yeah, I think just reading up a lot and being clear about what you want is important. So there are students who even before they begin their college selections are intimidated by the thought of going to a college with like 30,000 students, right? They feel like they'll be lost in the crowd. At which point, I typically direct them to start looking at the liberal arts colleges, because they offer the same kind of quality of education, but much more intimate, small class sizes, and more accessible professors and so on. And once they know what they need to research on, I think it becomes a lot easier for them. But yeah, I think starting with the FISC guide, I found that to be very useful. It's a very good summary of what's out there. And yeah, just doing your own research online, I would highly recommend also integrate AI into all your research at this point, because it's become really good. You sort of need to always, as a student, use AI as a co-pilot. You can get it to create an initial research list for you. You can basically prompt it to say, okay, you know what, I don't want to just look at the top ranked universities, I want to look at the ones that are the perfect fit for me, and ask me questions to find out more about me, then come up with these university lists. Use that as the starting point of your research, and just make sure that whatever you're finding about these universities, it's also referencing, so you're able to go back and actually double check that it's not hallucinating, it's actually giving you the right info. um, But yeah, absolutely use AI in helping you research this.
This is fantastic piece of advice in terms of research. I am specifically in of the FISC guide for all the viewers and listeners. FISC guide is actually updated year on year basis, so there is a new edition that comes out. I don't know how much different is the older edition from the newer edition. In case there are new updates or new changes or new things that have come on. It's there. It's like a huge guide of all the universities. So, guys, if you're looking at research that is condensed in 2 pages, the same information can be found on the net. You'll just have to explore pages and pages and pages if you actually find out what you're looking for. If you want everything that a college has to offer condensed in just 2 pages, including the ranking, whether it's public or private, number of students, number of research professors, types of universities, this guide, that's a great point, Sriram. And now we come back to the College Catapult Program, which is something that I'm very excited for all of our viewers to know. When we spoke about it, I got very excited because I was like, oh, I did not know there was something like this that existed. And also at a very, very affordable rate. Because, again, I am not one of those who promotes expensive or, cheap products, but I just feel that, bringing it at a rate which is more accessible to a lot of people um, kind of justifies the objective that you really want to help people, and not just like the money is a byproduct, just like the college is a byproduct, and that reflects in your ideology when you price this program as well. So, Ram, if you can just let our viewers know what exactly the College Catapult Program is, and if you're comfortable even sharing the pricing structure, or at least a ballpark of what students can expect to put in if they were enrolled in this program, and what are the outcomes of the program.
Yeah. So the College Catapult is actually an end-to-end college application program. It starts when the student comes into, say, grade 8 or grade 9, when they're just starting to think about what they might want to pursue in the future. A lot of the times, those students aren't yet thinking about studying abroad. They're just trying to figure out what they want to do. So it starts at that point. And typically, when we onboard these students, we help them identify this by having them work through a few of the junior MBA programs that we run. So these industry partner programs where they can work on a marketing project with Puma, work on a advertising project with Domino's, work on a finance project with Grow, consulting project with Taj Hotels, right? Design project with Kellogg. So these give them the sort of first hand experiences of what it means to work in these fields. So what we talked about right at the beginning of this podcast. Um, the idea behind doing this is you get a first hand experience. You're much better equipped to then eventually make that choice for yourself. So, okay, this is what I'd like to pursue. Um, so that's usually the first point. We help with identifying that goal and creating a roadmap. The second part of this is actually profile building. So once you've identified that goal, what does building a profile within that goal look like, right? So exploration and then acceleration. What does acceleration look like? So it typically involves you working on that achievement and launch part of your profile. So we have students work on internships. We have students who take part in multiple competitions. We curate a set of competitions that they can explore, see which one's a good fit for them. Um, we help them connect with grants if they have interesting ideas. We help them make grant applications, and most importantly, I think what actually really is unique to the Catapult program is we run a series of incubators. Incubators are one-on-one mentoring programs. So these last for 8 weeks. They typically run over the summer, and in those 8 weeks, the student is paired with one person from industry, and they will guide the student in bringing something to life. Now, you could bring multiple things to life. You could bring a business to life. You could bring a research paper. You could write a research paper and publish it. You could develop and launch a tech product and get users. You could host one of these sort of large scale events and so on. So a couple of those examples that I gave you, the student who had prepared the uh, that motion detector camera with a machine learning model did that in the tech incubator. The student who had launched that virtual museum for the Jewish community in Mumbai had done that as part of the leadership incubator. So these incubators basically help students in bringing these concepts to life. And if a student joins early on, then they have multiple shots at target. So they have multiple opportunities to participate in these incubators. At the end of grade 9, grade 10, grade 11. So by the time they reach grade 12, they have a very consistent profile with a lot of um, yeah, just it just shows consistency in what they've been trying to achieve. As part of what we do, we also have students identify early on the kind of impact that they would like to work towards, and ideally we suggest that they keep this consistent. So if you're interested in, say, women's rights issues in grade 9, it actually looks fantastic to a college if you're consistently working on this. Let's say in the first year working on a leadership project where you're helping um, sort of spread awareness. In the second year, you're working on a research project. In the third year, you're working on some kind of a tech project related to this. So, consistency, thematic consistency in their profile is something that we sort of build into the roadmaps that we help students create for themselves. And alongside that, we do the usual stuff. So, we help them prepare for their SAT. We help them with writing their um telling the story in their college applications. The storytelling needs to be coherent and consistent. It needs to talk about not just the successful end outcomes of the projects, but also all the detours that they had to take and all the dead ends that they reached, and they had to come back and sort of find their way again. Because that's basically the story the colleges are looking for. It is looking for a story of self-improvement. And once all of this is stitched together, it actually makes for a very compelling application, is what I've typically seen.
Absolutely. Ram, another question. I see a lot of people making different kinds of errors in their college application journey. Some end up starting very late. Some just don't take the tests to only realize the colleges that they're aspiring for is a test compulsory, unfortunately. And, one sooner or later, by next year, all the IVs are going to be test compulsory. That's essentially how it's going to be. So I wanted to understand what are the common errors or mistakes that you as a mentor see students making, let's say just before the summer of from the summer before the ninth grade all the way to the application, and how can you as a mentor or college catapult as a program help them navigate those through those errors? Have you actually helped any student who came to you pretty late and you were able to kind of hold them together and say, hang on, this is a mistake, you already there, you already 50% made a mistake, stop, we can help you, let's just diverge and get onto a path where we can save you. So if you can just give ideas that one, mistakes; two, how college catapult or you as a mentor can help; and three, any students who you saved, literally saved, the word saved.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll give you live examples. We had a student in this application season where the first week of Jan was the date when we were supposed to log on and sort of submit all the applications. So one of our mentors was on the call. I was there with the mentor just to kind of observe the process, and the student said, "Oh yeah, and what about my financial aid application?" And we said, what financial aid application? Because we the student had never before indicated in the entire process that there is a financial aid requirement, right? Which then drastically changes the kinds of colleges that you should be looking at. Because as an international student, relying on financial aid really reduces your chances of getting admissions. I think that's the harsh reality of college applications. So pretty much on the spot, we had to sort of help the student revise their college list completely, to say these are the ones you can still apply to, these are the ones you need to now look at, because financial aid has suddenly become like a integral part of your, like a non-negotiable. So I think that was the most drastic one. But I think we basically did research overnight to help him figure out what the new college list should be. Tried to find the ones where the kind of work that he had already done would kind of map into what was required. um, that was a little bit of a scary one. But yeah, I think a lot of people make the mistake that they don't fully communicate their financial aid expectations when they're applying for college. So this year, as part of our process, as early as March and April this year, I've started talking with the applicants about documenting their financial aid requirements. And I think that's critical, because they should be aware of the college selections and how it affects the selection. That's one. The other one, of course, is starting late. But you oftentimes, I'm not really sure to what extent you can help that. um, if you have the choice of starting early, great. But don't start late, because you just don't want to think about it in ninth and 10th grade. Or you want to postpone that decision to later. You start early because it gives you a huge advantage if you start early. um, at the same time, we do get students who have sort of been preparing for competitive exams. They've been in Akash or Allen or one of these integrated schools preparing for JE, and within the first couple of exams they realize that bhaiya nahi hone wala, I'm not cut out for this. So then they sort of switch tracks, right? And they say, can I now start looking at applying abroad? And it's a bit late in the process, but I think it's these students also typically come with fantastic work ethic, and they come with very good grades, and they tend to do really well academically because fortunately or unfortunately, it's like easier to get into MIT and Harvard than IIT, right? It's just the reality of it. So we help them with sort of very quickly building up the kind of profile that they need, and talking about the shift that they undertook as part of their presentation or their applications to college. So these are some typical things that I see. Yeah, I think starting early, I think being clear about financial aid requirements, I think if they can do these, most of the problems are sorted out. The one thing, the one again, the one other issue that I commonly see is that um, students, rather than aiming for a particular uh, field or a major that they want to get into, aim for the college instead. So they look at a college and say, I need to get into this college by hook or crook, right? I need to, like, it doesn't matter, should I apply as a computer science major, should I apply as an archaeology major, should I apply as like something else? And that to me doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because when you're even if you're applying, if you're a computer science major, you think you won't get in for computer science, so you're applying for archaeology instead. Firstly, a lot of the public universities don't allow you to switch later into a capped major, as they call it. And even in the private universities that allow you to do that, if you're saying you are interested in archaeology, that entire deal framework, the direction, effort, achievement, launch, entire profile needs to back up your interest in archaeology, right? So it's not like you can at the last minute just pick a backdoor entry into a reputed university and then change your. I mean, if it was that simple, then everybody would do it, and colleges have, they're wise to that.
Of course. And I think these are very good points. But there is one point that I'd like to add, and this is something that I tell to all my parents, right? So oftentimes we call them as IIT, JE, or like NEET spillovers, right? Like somewhere around their 11th or 12th grade, they realize, oh, this is not my cup of tea, and I want to switch. Now, there are two kinds of parents. Either they realize it later and whatever, like, you make the best of whatever opportunities you get. Or then there are parents who come to us and they are like, ma'am, should I do IIT or should I do, study abroad, or should I do both? And I just tell them you can't do both, first of all,
Yeah,
because they're two very different things, right? Like when you're preparing for IIT or NEET or one of the Indian exams, I'm not saying they're good or bad. It's very, very academic in its nature. They don't care about profile building, they don't care about anything else. There are no interviews. There's a certain cutoff. You make through that cutoff, you make it to the school. If you don't, you don't, right? And then we're looking at universities abroad. There is a lot of profile building going in, and there are competitive exams, and you have to use your deal framework just generally and get those internships and stuff like that. And again, find a cause that you resonate with. So the question for every parent who's confused between should I take my kid the IIT way or should I take the education abroad way, I ask them is, does your kid have the ability to stand in top 500 students amongst lakhs and lakhs and lakhs of applicants who do IIT every year? I don't want you to answer this question to me. I want you to answer this question to yourself. If you think your kid has that ability, realistically, not having a myopic view, that my kid can make it, then go the IIT route. Otherwise, if you want to stay in India, there are many liberal art options. There are also the regular CET options. And if you think that the answer to that question is no, and you're open and you have the finances that support you to study abroad, then please switch the path. If you come somewhere around 11th or 12th grade, you're not going to make the cut. You may get a decent university, but probably your child had the ability to make it to a Harvard or an MIT, or I don't know, wherever, but they could have gotten a much better university where they rather than where they end up getting. So
yeah,
please be very clear, very vigilant in terms of what your choices are, because as if you're not honest to yourself, your kid is going to suffer, and this is something that I tell all my parents, and I hope that through this podcast this is clear enough to all the parents to know that you are the one who needs to decide this pathway early on, and not put this on somebody else, because it's not going to happen. Nobody can do that for you. So yeah, that's another thing that I really want to contribute. Ram, any last words before we let you sign off after today's podcast, which has been,
No, I
I
think
think,
just to
fantastic.
add on to what you said right now, Rima, I think for a student who is joining in that late, right, I would say play to your strengths. If your strengths are academic skill sets, then don't try to sort of force fit a US college application into that timeline, because that's not going to be the best way to showcase your ability, right? You can look at colleges in Australia, Singapore, which are or Europe or UK, which are a lot more rewarding of academic ability and less demanding in terms of your extracurricular profile. So those would often be you do more justice to your own skill sets by switching late in the game to one of those tracks rather than to the US application track, because then you kind of end up doing neither properly.
I agree. And I think it's very important to evaluate. But I think if you can avoid this error early on, you'll save yourself a lot of time, money, and effort,
Yeah,
which you could be redirected to better colleges, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong in redirecting something to another space. So that's that. But
yeah.
anyways, Ram, any last words, any last minute things that you'd like to advise students, anything that you have on your mind that, hey, you know what, you should keep this in mind for all the students, the parents out there before we let you go.
I think the one thing is, even though all of this seems like very high stakes at that point when you have to make that decision, in the larger scheme of things, these aren't actually very high stakes. You know, the kind of subjects you school choose in high school. Who cares, Rima? What did you take in high school? Who cares what you took in high school? Right? What subjects did I take in high school? It didn't make an iota
I'm
of
an
difference.
engineer. Look what
Yeah,
am I doing?
exactly. So I mean, that's literally my all half the people that I graduated with from college. Some of them were chemical engineers, some of them were cognitive science students, some of them were applied mathematicians, some of them were they were into bacteriology or something. I was in economics, I was in finance. At the like 2 or 3 years after we graduated, everyone was working in finance. Because that's the reality of it. I mean, it's even if you look at India, if you look at all the top engineers, in it doesn't matter what you studied. If the high probability is you're going to work in IT, right? So in the way I see it, at least as a trained economist, I see different parts of the economy booming at different times. And when that economy booms, when that particular part of the economy booms, they're not looking for technical talent, they're just looking for smart people. So if you're a smart person, no matter what field you come from, that part of the economy that's booming is going to absorb you. Right? So, which is why I think it's futile often to plan too far into the future. You kind of just can work on preparing your own skill sets and keeping an eye out for opportunities. Because the reality is that everyone's going to study something different, end up in a field that's very different. I've only ever seen like lawyers, accountants, doctors work in the same fields that they studied. Almost everyone else ends up working in whatever part of the economy is booming at that moment. So uh, yeah, I think in many ways, a lot of this, the more we accept that a lot of this is not completely in your control and you can't like chart the part perfectly, it just takes the stress off.
Perfect. And I think that's great piece of advice for a lot of people who are sitting and contemplating what they're going to do with their degrees. What happens, if an economy falls apart, you're going to be fine. What happens if AI takes all the jobs? You're going to be fine. If AI takes all, this is the same conundrum. Once a parent once told me that, this is like slightly older parent. He said, when computers came out in the 60s and the 70s, there was this thing where they said computers going to take all the jobs away. All the manual labor is going to go away. And look where we ended up 40, 50 years from that point on. It actually produced more jobs than it took away jobs. So AI is also going to be the same. Stop contemplating, start working on what you need to do. You're going to figure your life out, just like your life is going to figure out itself as well. But thank you so much for being on the podcast, Ram. I learned so much about Clever Harvey. I learned so much about College Catapult. And more than anything, the passion that you nurture your kids with is actually amazing. I am in awe of what you do with your kids, and I hope that, kids really really find mentors like yourself, in terms of growing and getting somewhere in life, because at the end of the day you're going to end up where you're going to be. But I think a good teacher, a good mentor is what helps you get to that finish line. And I'm so glad that, kids have an opportunity to be a part of uh, you know be a part of the college catapult program, and overall just access you. What I'm also going to do is link your Instagram handle, your LinkedIn handle, as well as an email ID that students can reach out to you in case they need help. And once again, students, listeners, everybody else who's seen this podcast and listened to this podcast, I hope you had a great time. And Ram, thank you once again for coming to the show. I truly appreciate your time.